Hello, everybody. Please sit down. Please sit down. So, hello, back there. I can't see you. Mi futura novia? So first of all, Senator Udall, who spoke here before, he was overly gracious to me. The truth of the matter is, we all know this. It's not what people say with their mouths, it's what they do. Being a good speaker has nothing, can never beat being a great doer. And he is a great activist. He is so engaged. He is working in the trenches every single day, creating bipartisan solutions to our country's most challenging problems. I want to thank him not just for his leadership in our nation, but for being a mentor to me in the United States Senate. So please give him another round of applause if you can. And then one of the more extraordinary leaders that I've met in my time in Washington, a guy that blows me away because of his work ethic, and that he's talking about me. Dear God, this guy works around the clock with a mission of understanding that economic growth, the depth of potential for our country will never be achieved unless it is achieved within the Latino community. And so please give Javier the kind of respect he deserves. One more round of applause. And Javier's ridiculous in the sense that he talks about diplomas on a wall. We all know, like a great American once said, never confuse your education with your schooling. We all know many people with many degrees after their name, but my father used to say that about me. He said, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you're not hot. And the truth is, I got into Stanford because of a 4.0 and 1,600. 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. I was a football player at Stanford University. But I came from a father who told a story that many people here can relate to. My father grew up in a very different America than I did. In fact, when my parents fought a court case in 1969, I literally had to get the Fair Housing Council to get white couples to pose as them when they were buying their homes. And then on the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My parents, who had been turned down, told the house was for sale. And then the white couple found out that it wasn't. On the day of the closing, my father showed up with a lawyer instead of the white couple, and literally the lawyer gets punched in the face by the real estate agent. He's so angry, sigs a dog on my dad. And by the way, every time my dad would tell the story, the dog gets bigger. But that's what my father raised my brother and I. And in this affluent, mostly white town, as my father called us, the 4 raisins in a tub of vanilla ice cream. And my father would look at me and say, you know, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple. He said, you are here, you were born on third base. And you drank deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that you didn't dig. You eat lavishly from banquet tables prepared for you by your ancestors. Don't just sit back getting dumb, fat, and happy, consuming all of these blessings. You've got to let these blessings metabolize in your body so you continue the fight for America. Because this country, when we stand up and we say those words, liberty and justice for all, that's not our truth yet. We have work to do to make this nation inclusive, so that everyone has their opportunity to experience the American dream. And here's the beautiful thing about it. When we focus on inclusion, when we focus on spreading opportunity, that's not just, hey, we're going to help the Black community, the Latino community, or the Pacific Islander community. No, it's an understanding that when your fellow countryman does well, thrives, starts a business, it creates jobs and economic opportunity for your family. We are an interdependent nation. We need each other, and we must begin to recognize that. When we deny folks from getting on the playing field, when we deny them opportunity, we may be hurting them, but we're hurting ourselves too. I'm tired of this country, people in this country, our nation, starting to hail tolerance as if that's a great state of being. We're going to just we're a tolerant society. No, that's not what we're called to be. We're called to be a patriotic country. Patriotism is love of country, which necessitates loving your countrymen and women. Tolerance says, I'm just going to stomach your right to be different. That if you disappear off the face of the earth, I'm no better or worse off. I was just tolerating you. Love says, I recognize your worth and your value. And I recognize that we have a need for each other. This was what was written into our founding documents. Now, don't get me wrong. I recognize our founding documents and their imperfections. Native Americans were referred to as savages. Women weren't referred to as all. African Americans, Stokely Carmichael, the activist, used to always say constitute, constitute. I can only say 3/5 of the word. That's a joke that will sneak up on you if you think about it. But the spirit of our Constitution, the spirit of our Declaration of Independence, the spirit of our founding documents ignited a light to humanity. And one of the core understandings was this, that we need each other, like the old African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. At the end of that Declaration of Independence is a recognition that we as a nation will never be great, will never make it unless we commit to a level of interdependency. It says at the end of that, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We are a nation that must recognize the value and the worth of everyone. And when we have realities where certain people, certain folks, based on their religion or their ethnicity or their gender, are not being allowed to play equally on the field, we all suffer. This is why on the Small Business Committee, I got furious when we see that loans given out by the SBA, that Latinos and blacks are disproportionately denied loans. But my experience as far as the loan worthiness, especially in the Latino community, I was a mayor and I had to grow my city. And when my city is over a third Latino, I know that there's value and worth, and that we brought in companies when people told me we can't get access to capital, we brought in Kiva, which created different loan metrics. And they realized that, wait a minute, maybe the official banks may not give you loans, but when you have your peers vouching for you, you actually can do loans that are denied by the banks, small microloans that had better repayments than the banks were getting. Because in our communities, we know what the traditions are. We know what the values are. And so when I come to Washington and I begin just to ask the question, we don't have a history in my body of diversity. I'm the 4th elected African American in the history of our country. We don't have representation like we should, the rich diversity of Latinos and Asians. And so I feel all of us senators should be calling questions. Are we creating a fair playing field? And again, fairness for you is not the disadvantage of me. It helps us all. When I came to Washington, I know there's so many different ways to make wealth in America. I called the question. In Texas to New Jersey, pension fund management, not something we talk about every day, but heck, there's a lot of people making a lot of money managing the pension funds for states, local, and federal governments. And the people paying into that fund reflect the rich diversity of our country. You would expect that the people managing those funds should also reflect that diversity. And those wealth opportunities should be shared and grown upon many different folks. Well, we asked the question because Texas, a red state, has an emerging manager program for women and minorities. New York, New Jersey have emerging manager programs. The biggest pension funds in America, which is the federal government's pension plans, we should have diversity. So I get to the table. I call the question, how much diversity do we have in our pension funds? Do we have any Latino managers? Any women-run businesses? And the answer I get back is 0, none. We are not where we must be in this country for all of us to experience growth. The more the Latino community grows in economic strength, that's not a win for Latinos only. It's a win for America. We need to, you can applaud that. And so this is my commitment. There's 2 things my office is working on, 2 themes we work on. One is economic growth. We've got to grow as a country, expand opportunity, not just for the favored few, but grow our country so that there's more job opportunities, more business opportunities, that we can be a model to this globe about everything from social mobility, the chances a kid has to be born in poverty, to make the American dream. I'm here today because of that theme. Two parents who joined a booming industry. They got involved with a small tech firm, some of you might have heard of, called IBM. Economic growth, but the other one my parents experienced as well, which is we need everybody on the field. We cannot deny opportunities to folks based upon race, gender, religion, sexual orientation. Look around you. I don't care what your background is. You could be Irish, you could be a woman, you could be gay. There was a point where corporate America probably didn't want you. My parents came to Washington, D.C. right after college at a time that corporate America wasn't hiring many black and Latinos. And it was activists that said, we are self-inflicting a wound when we're not giving qualified minorities a chance to contribute. And so activism started, and before you knew it, my dad was getting jobs as the first African-American hired by an oil company and department store. Next thing you know, he becomes IBM's first black salesman in the entire Virginia area. And what happened for my family, my dad did incredibly well because Latinos and blacks, given the chance, they're hungry. We are hungry people, will contribute. Before you knew it, he was making the top 5% in IBM's global salespeople. And so this is the fight that we have to continue to do to earn our right. To earn our right to say proudly that we are inheritors of the American dream. Now, I'll tell you this. We have to understand that we can't allow our ignorance and petty partisan politics to stop us from doing what is right for us economically and what is a true honoring of our history. We are an immigrant country. And yet now we have a Congress that is not even acting on the things that honor our history and not doing the things that will grow our economy and preaching from a gospel of intolerance and nativism, which is an insult to the truth of our country. I was a mayor when Senators Rubio and Menendez and others joined together and put together an immigration reform bill that passed out of the Senate. Now, it was an imperfect bill. I'm a Democrat. There were things in there, I wish there was more stuff in there that I wanted, but it was a compromise bill. I'm not exaggerating these numbers. If you just put the economic lens on, growing this economy, one of the pillars of what I'm fighting for in Washington, if you just put that immigration reform bill, if it became law, the Congressional Budget Office, I'm not exaggerating these numbers, said it would have cut over about a decade the U.S. deficit by about $1 trillion. That it would have grown our economy over a decade by about 3%. Expanding jobs and economic opportunities, not just for Latinos, but for people from all backgrounds. We in a country had a blueprint that we're not following now. Waves of Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, who came to this country with a dream, a mighty dream. And now we want to change the rules of the game and not have sensible immigration policies. In fact, have immigration practices that are breaking up families, having children who know no other country but this one, live in fear that their parents will be taken away or they'll be taken away themselves. That people who show up on our borders escaping persecution don't get met with hope and opportunity, but jeers, hatred, and bigotry. That's not just bad for our moral soul, it's bad for our economics. And let me give you one more example as I now overstay my time. I'm a politician who wanted to be a preacher. I'm bad news at a microphone. But we waste taxpayer dollars pursuing broken policies that have bigoted effects. There is no difference in America between blacks, Latinos, and whites in using drugs or dealing drugs. None whatsoever. In fact, there's none of them. In fact, young white men have a little bit higher rates of dealing drugs. But when it comes to the arrests for these crimes, Latinos are twice as likely to be arrested for drug crimes. And they're nearly a third more likely for the same crime to get the mandatory minimum sentence than somebody that's white. We do not have a justice system that is equal justice under the law. In fact, this drug war that we've had that has increased our prison population on the federal level 800%, that has taken trillions of our dollars, while our real infrastructure that grows business, like our roads and our bridges and our ports, have been declining and decaying and crumbling. One area of infrastructure we've been building out, a new prison every 10 days between the mid-1990s and the mid-2000s. Every 10 days. To warehouse people in a drug war, there are more people incarcerated today for nonviolent drug offenses than all the people incarcerated in 1975. And that population is disproportionately people of color for doing things often what the last two presidents admitted to doing. I'm not lying. And not only is this a grievous waste of our taxpayer dollars, it's a grievous waste of human potential. Studies now show that we'd have 20% less poverty if we had the same incarceration rate as our industrial peers. 20% less poverty. Because when you disproportionately focus a drug war on minority communities, you sap away their strength. Children growing up without their parents. People with nonviolent drug charges that can't get a loan at a bank, can't get a business license, can't get a Pell Grant. We've got to end these bigoted, biased outcomes that come about from a broken criminal justice system that are undermining not just the truth of our country, but hurting communities like Latinos. And so let me end with this point. We are all gathered together here, and I know there's folks, everybody's dressed nicely in suits and everything, but please understand, you're here because of the call and cause of our country. People gather together with ideas of creating increased opportunity, fairness, expanding the hope and the promise of this country. People have been gathering from church basements to storefronts, to even barn houses, planning to build one of the best infrastructure projects ever were, the Underground Railroad. This group here, you are being called to work on things that expand the opportunity, expand the vision, expand the hope, to expand the very American dream. But those things don't come automatically. So I end where I began, with my dad. My father loved this country so much. He believed that if people are given a fair shot, and that we have a government and communities and people that focus on economic growth, there's nothing we can't do. But he knew, as Martin Luther King said, that change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes in from people who stand up and work for it. And so I end with a story about my dad sitting in the back of a classroom. Most of my dad's stories are apocryphal, I know. I was afraid to go to North Carolina as a child because every story of his, it was raining and then there was hail the size of golf balls. By the time I was out of college, the hail was the size of beach balls, for crying out loud. He started one story once, "Oh, Cory, when the tsunami hit our town." And I'm like, "Dad, you grew up in the mountains of North Carolina." And he's one of those indignant people. I know you all have a family member like this. When you challenge him, he gets all upset. He goes, "Boy, it was before the internet. You can't look it up, but it happened." And he was standing in the back of a classroom. And he said, the teacher comes in and says, "Class, I want to teach you all about self-esteem. Anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid, I want you to stand up right now." And my father said, all the kids just sat there and looked at each other. And the teacher stood there impatiently. She goes, "Come on, if you think you're dumb, you think you're stupid, stand up right now." Nobody moved. And finally, my father just looked around and pushed his chair back and stood up proudly. And the teacher looked at him and said, "Mr. Booker boy, what's wrong with you? You think you're dumb? You think you're stupid?" And my father said, "Well, shucks, ma'am, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing." Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, we have work to do, and we got to stand up for it. We got to stand up because people stood for us. They scrubbed toilets for us. They cleaned floors for us. They worked in restaurants at below minimum wage for us. We got to stand up because people marched for us and protested for us. We got to stand. We got to stand because change doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. We got to stand because, as Frederick Douglass says, in life you don't get everything you pay for, but you got to pay for everything that you get. We got to stand. We have work to do. The dream still demands. The call of our country still necessitates courage. Yo tengo fe, tengo esperanza, unido. Si nosotros trabajamos unido, vamos a tener éxito grande para todo nuestro país. This is our destiny. This is our call. Thank you and God bless you.